Here's me mug, and here's the board game Ankh. I'm here to tell you about this beautiful looking game that rocked up on my doorstep a couple of weeks ago. I got a bunch of players in with me mates, so now I reckon I can tell you all what I think about this sweet looking game. Ankh is an Egyptian themed area control game where you're vying to be the last remaining god in Egypt. Now, if you're not a board game nerd like me, you might be asking, what's that mean? It boils down to you being one of these big gods, and you got a bunch of these little warriors, and they're all trying to prove that my dad could beat up your dad. This game comes from a bloke called Eric Lang, and is published by CMON. These fellas have done two similar previous games. One's called Blood Rage, where you're trying to be the best Viking clan, and Rising Sun, where you're trying to be the most noble and honourable clan in feudal Japan. They're all a bit same, but different, trying to prove again that your dad can beat up their dad, recruit mythical monsters, and do some other stuff too. He calls these games the Mythic Trilogy. Pretty unimaginative if you ask me, only a step up from me 3 games with monsters, but people will like them, so I guess he can call them what he wants. So here's me board. Well, actually, I got this off that unspecified crowdfunding website where people go to throw stupid amounts of cash at board games that don't exist yet, like I did with this. What that means is I've got this fancy, oversized computer mousepad with a bunch of plastic bits that you won't get if you buy it in a shop. But the game plays the same. This one just looks fancy. So on this artistic wetsuit, we got a bunch of monuments, temples, obelisks, and pyramids. Actually, in this case, we don't start with any pyramids built. Guess we got to Egypt too early and they're not made yet. No wuckers, we can build them ourselves during the game. All good, mates. But you can also set the board different, so you do have some of them there to begin with. Doesn't matter. Anyway, we carve up land into different regions, and you want to own some monument real estate in these regions so people worship your god, because that's how you win the game. You're not collecting wood, you're trying to reach the top of this thing called the devotion track. If you hit the top, you automatically win. Otherwise, whoever's highest at the end of the game wins. And with that, I guess we should start talking about how you actually play the game. Most of the game is going to revolve around 4 actions. You can move your figures on the map, add 1 or maybe more to the map. You can gain followers, who are basically like your money for this game, and you can unlock magic powers. Because what kind of board game god would you be if you didn't have magic powers? A pretty boring one, I reckon. Anyway, when you take a turn, you get to move 2 of these things. But the second one you move has to be lower than the first one. So you can move your figures around and then add some more to the board, but you can't do it the other way around. Sometimes you might only get to move 1 of these things, because on your first move you hit the end of this little track. That means you only get to do 1 of these things this turn. But hitting the end here is how the game moves along. The little marker moves back to the start of the track. How far along depends on how many players you have, and then you trigger what's called an event. There's 3 different types of these. First is Control Monument. This is where you get to control the Egyptian real estate market and take control of a monument. Pretty much like it says on the back. These things are tops, because they're how you're going to get devotion and win the game. Then there's Place Camels, where you get to chuck a bunch of camels down, and somehow this divvies up the land, like you're chucking a big old river in the middle of it, except it's a river of camels. Now, I know that sounds pretty boring, but it's actually a ripper. It's like just being able to chop a map and go, yeah, this is mine, and yeah, that's mine too. Finally, there's the Conflict event, which means it's Fight Club time. In Fight Club, you'll look at all the different regions on the map, and it's a big free-for-all for anyone who is in any region. You don't want to fight? Tough, you should have got out of the ring before the bell. Anyway, everyone has a hand of cards, and everyone's got the same set of cards. These do sweet things, like giving you a proton energy pill so you can biff on better. Contact the local builders to put up some new real estate for you. Bringing out the airbows to do some sweet first aid and prevent you dudes from needing to go back to the hospital and come off the board. And great stuff like that. However, once you play a card, it's gone. Until you play one of your cards that brings everything back in your hand, including that one. Then at the end of each match, you get some devotion for having the most of each type of monument in a region. The real estate market apparently is the way these gods get religious followers. And then also from winning the cage match. Losers go to the hospital off the board, except for the gods, who have Wolverine healing powers and just keep on kicking. At the end of the 4th fight night, players could get eliminated if their gods aren't popular enough. And at the end of the 5th fight, it's a guaranteed game over. That's providing someone hasn't already finished it before then by getting enough calls on the god hotline and getting the gold buzzer. So that's how you play. Now let's talk about what's good and bad. So right off the bat, I'm going to tell you all that I like this game. I reckon it's tops, and I've had a ton of fun playing it. One of the great things is the amount of variety you can have. First off, you got your god powers, which mixes up how each person plays a bit. This Osiris fella can chuck gates to the underworld around that only he or his warriors can take a nap on. Anubis collects people who got sent to the hospital right after Fight Club, and they power him up, unless you pay him to get him out. And once per Fight Club, CMON can choose to play 2 cards at the same time, so he can right smack someone upside the head if you want. This means everyone's going to be playing a bit different, and you can mix it up by picking a different god each time. Another way the game gets mixed up is by having these scenarios. The game comes with a booklet that tells you how to set up the board, which can make things play out very differently. In this scenario I had set up, there aren't any pyramids, but other scenarios have those. There's camels that go in different spots, and even things to mix up how some of the events play out. I've only played the basic scenarios so far, but some of the advanced ones definitely are going to make things interesting, even for the smart buggers out there. Last, you got your guardians. These little beasties are when you buy some of your magic god powers, your 2nd, 4th and 5th one. When you do that, you get one of the guardians, if other greedy players haven't grabbed them all already. These can do things like hang out in water, destroy monuments, or other cool things that mix up the strategy. Idiots like me who dumped way too much money on this game have a stupid amount of these things as bonuses, so I have more than enough options to play with. Probably too many, to be honest. They come in 3 levels, 1, 2 and 3, and in the basic game you get 2 of each level, but that'll be more than enough to let you switch things up a bit. Now I've just realised I've been talking all about the gameplay and not focused on the pretty bits of plastic and all the cardboard and other things that people on the internets go nuts over. I think these things should be completely unnecessary when playing board games, but bugger me, they look pretty. Even the small little warriors have a ton of detail on them. If you're someone who paints these things, you could probably make them look fantastic. Mine, well, they're probably just Stoney's plain colours. Anyway, like I said before, I got this fancy copy where most of this stuff is plastic, so normally your monuments are going to be little cardboard tokens that go on the map, but it's still going to do everything you need it to. Now, I've got another thing to say. I actually really enjoyed plonking down camels on the map. I'm not even joking on this one. The way you can carve up the map how you want is an awesome idea that I've not seen much elsewhere. Plus, you get to reorder how Fight Night occurs. It seems like a pretty unimportant decision, but you can actually get a ton out of it. In one game, someone won by rearranging the order battles would happen and hitting the top of the Godline hotline pops first. If they hadn't, someone else would have taken the gong before him. It was an absolutely mint play. Of course, when I'm talking about a game, I can't just tell you all the good things and how much I love it, but I've got to tell you what I think isn't so great. There's a couple of problems I got with Ankh. The first is the little guardian beasties. As I said, you get them by unlocking your magic god powers, provided the other players haven't nicked them all. Problem is, once someone starts grabbing them, they're more likely to be able to keep grabbing them because other players have got to catch up and overtake them unlocking those powers. It's especially bad if you're playing with just one mate, because then there's only one of each of the little brats. So you can get stiffed out of having even a single one of them, and it kind of feels like someone just stole all the snags from the Barbie. But my biggest problem with the game is what happens after Fight Club sessions. After the third stoush, where everyone smacks each other around, the 2 losers team up to make one biggest loser. The person coming dead last has all their stuff taken off the board and gives any guardian monsters their new bestie. But then, and this is where it gets a bit crap for the new biggest loser, the player who was second last drops their devotion back to the player who was in last place. The problem is, after this, there's not much too longer in the game before everyone has another big rumble, and then anyone who doesn't get out of this red zone is out of the game. Blamo, kicked out of Egypt, forgotten, dead and gone. They're done. And this kind of blows, especially if the player who was last was losing by a bit. I found in me 5-player games, and some me 4-player games, that this new biggest loser just ends up getting smashed out of the game in the next biff on. Maybe if the last player isn't quite so far behind, it won't be so bad. But so far it seems like getting merged is almost saying, nah, you're a bit crap. After next Fight Club, your name is, well, actually no one cares what your name is. All of Egypt just forgot about you. It's not the turbo boost it should be to get you the heck out of last place. It's more like the leaders of the game get to shoot a blue shell back at the losers. Long story short, this was meant to be a cool new shiny thing that got added to the game, but it seems like they kind of bollocksed it up somehow. Those are my 2 biggest issues with the game, but there are reasons why other people might not like it too. Here's where I probably got to talk about some of those other games I mentioned before, Blood Rage and Rising Sun. A lot of people like Blood Rage just because you could start a biffo most of the time, but other people could decide, yeah, I want in for a bit of punch on. Rising Sun made people chill out and just had people fighting at the end of each season, all civilised like. Yeah, nah, let's just be friends, we're all good, just friends. Wait, it's the end of spring? Right, time to bash ya. Same deal at the end of summer and autumn. Then everyone just went home and sat on the couch for winter and figured out who was the best. Now, Ankh is a lot more like Rising Sun, in that you're all moving around and mostly being peaceful. Sure, you can get into rental disputes where you can take over someone else's monument or plonk down some of those camels to go, nah, you can stay over there and I'll stick over here on the other side of these camels. Mostly it's just being friendly until you hit one of those conflict events and everyone gets to punch on. So some people might feel like they're not doing a whole lot until it comes time for the next fight club. It's a lot of strategizing and positioning, standing and going, yeah, nah, you want some? Yeah, you want some? Yeah, nah, not right now, maybe later. It's like, oh, yeah, alright, yeah, let's do it now. Altogether, this means if someone doesn't know what they're doing, they're probably going to get kicked 2 ways into next Sunday. There's a lot of using your noggin that you've got to do if you want to win the game, planning ahead to see if you can set yourself up to trigger a specific event, what you're going to do in the next battle, and position yourself ahead of time so you're ready in case someone else dings the bell for Fight Club. The way you play cards from your hand when you fight means you've got to pick and choose which battles you're going to deliberately lose, and when you're going to get all the cards back you've played in your hand. There's a lot to keep track of. In those larger player counts, you might struggle to set yourself up for a specific event. Now, to be fair, the most common one is the Control Monument event to get a hold of the real estate market, and there's enough of those to go around, so you'll probably get at least one. If you want to go further placing the camels or starting Fight Club, it could be a bit hard if you got 4 or 5 players, so that could be irritating if you really need one of those for your strategy. Next, some people are probably going to say some Ankh powers are clearly better than others and only ever pick their favourites. The thing is, there's actually a bit of flexibility in these. Even if it feels like some are more valuable than others, it's really going to depend on the game and the strategizing that you're doing. The other thing to be careful of is that this game is probably going to go for a while. It says 90 minutes on the box, but depending on the players, how much they talk and spend time looking and planning, it could be quite a bit longer than that. So you've got to be ready for the long haul for this one. Speaking of that, it's getting on a bit, so I should probably finish up and give you all my final thoughts. What do I think of Me Dad Could Beat Up Your Dad, Egypt Edition? As I said earlier, I think it's a great game. There's a ton of variety, a ton of thinking and strategy, and it's great to have this build up to fight night, and then it goes around bam, 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 and there's a full-on rumble that everyone wants a piece of. It's easy enough to figure out how everything plays, but playing the 5D chess mind games of positioning and planning will come with practice. To me, it seems there's quite a bit of depth with everything you got to play with. Where it might get a bit tougher is if you want to pick up a regular copy of it from your local gaming store. When I'm looking at my game, I've got 12 gods, I don't know how many different guardians. But the box you'll be buying at your local game store will only have 5 gods and 6 different guardians. That's going to cut down on your variability a heck of a lot. With the scenarios, you're still going to be able to play it a bunch, but you're probably still going to feel a bit shortchanged compared to what the people who got with this deluxe edition. You can pick up the Pantheon expansion to give yourself 5 extra gods, which could definitely help you mix it up a lot. There's even a Pharaoh expansion which can really shake things up. But if you're doing either of those, you're probably going to be spending even more money than you already would be to start with. For all the board game nerds out there like me, there's also the comparison to the 2 previous games in this trilogy. If you loved Blood Rage and hated Rising Sun, then Ankh probably isn't for you, as it's closer to Rising Sun than Blood Rage. That said, it does depend on what you didn't like about Rising Sun. If it was not being able to guarantee to do what you wanted, or the lots of bluffing that went on during its punch-on sessions, then Ankh is more likely to be up your alley. If it was because it didn't have enough aggression, or threat of constant action that Blood Rage has, Ankh probably isn't going to win you over. Personally, I like Blood Rage the least of the 3, and I feel like this one might overtake Rising Sun for me. But it's early days yet, so I'm not sure I want to make that call. All in all, I reckon Ankh is a great game with some issues that, depending on your taste, could range from niggling to outright frustrating. It's a bit unforgiving if you screw up, and that whole merging gods thing feels just a little bit off. I've seen some people thinking the game's too simple, while others reckon they don't get to do enough punch on. For me, I reckon there's a great balance between planning and punching on, and I think it's shaping up to be one of my favourite area control games. I don't really like giving scores to games that are so fresh in my collection, because I feel like I have to rate them a bit lower to avoid hyping them up too much. If you forced me to, I'd probably give it an 8, and I could easily see it going higher with more time. Thanks all for watching me review. Now it's time to go play some games.